Down off in here in Pelican Reef, Pelican Point, all this area back in here. Man, past week has been it's been okay. It's not been terrible. Tides have been still super low for us. That's the one thing you've had to contend with, especially early in the morning. Where no matter where you're fishing, if you're fishing over in Corpus Christi Bay, Aransas Bay, San Antonio Bay, and everywhere in between, you're having to deal with these low tides that we're contending with right now. And it's been that way for going on 5 weeks. But once you kind of figure some stuff out after that, then you can kind of have a game plan put in place for what these fish are wanting to do and how they're wanting to be and where they're wanting to be. Again, shell still the main thing that we're finding these trout around. Redfish up tight close to the banks in some of these areas, the hard packed sand and shell. In those particular areas, just like here on Panther, inside of Panther's been okay. Little Swan Lake's been okay. We've caught a few fish here and there. But the main thing where we're locating and finding fish is in and around shell and shell beds, shell reefs, shell bars, anything that's got lots of shell on it and maybe it's got some grass close to it. Bait's been not a problem at all. There's been plenty of bait working in these areas. So the one thing that we really have noticed too is when you get to these deeper edges of these reefs, that water's a tad bit cooler. And that's typically where these fish are being found at, is off that deeper edge of these reefs. So it doesn't matter if you're fishing up in San Antonio Bay or if you're fishing in Copano or parts of Mesquite, Aransas, wherever. As long as you're finding some good shell that's on a deeper edge to that, whatever that may be, you're going to find and locate you some fish. That's been pretty consistent now, going on for another week and a half, even more so. But even more so now that our temps have even gotten up warmer. Our water temps are starting out in the upper 80s, 89, 90 in some areas, which is just stupid ridiculous this time of year. It's typically not that way, but we just got this big old high pressure ridge that's just sitting in on top of us, and it's just not doing anything, which is good and bad. So, our temps are hot. Water temps are hot, but it's also keeping stuff out of that Gulf that we don't want any part of either. So it's a good and bad thing. But anyway, locating these fish off these edges like that, you can find them. We've been locating lots of trout. Of course, there's been plenty that's been in that 15 to 16 range all day long, 14s, 16s, whatever. We found plenty of those. The one thing that I've said it before and said it in the past, you'll continue to have to be this way, is you have to be patient and wade through some fish. That's the beauty of throwing the artificials, man. You can chunk and catch plenty of these little smaller, old size 15s to 17s. And then after about 8 or 9 or 10 fish that you've caught like that are, pretty solid, but they're not in the slot, then you'll catch 1 or 2 that are, that 17 to 19 inch range, depending on where you're at. So there's that. And then we're locating redfish in some of these shallower areas. Some of these back lakes are holding these fish. A few flounder in some of the deeper pockets, if you're so fortunate to get a hold of some of these. We're down here in Cedar Lake on the outer edge, Twin Lake on the outer edge, all the way down toward, haven't got into Powder Lake, but you're fishing that whole outside thing all the way down toward the first chain of islands. Lots of grass that's out here. You got some nice hard packed sand in these areas. You got shell that's scattered up and down there. So there's some fish that's holding in these areas, and it's going to give you opportunities. Topwater baits have been pretty good early. Once the sun pops, that topwater bait that bite pretty much goes away. So you need to be able to switch over to a plastic or a suspended bait of some sort and fish these little bit deeper edges of that grass. You'll locate some nice fish. Main baits, not any one particular bait has been super consistent, but there's been a handful that's been productive for us at different points and times in the morning. And the other thing too about that, if you haven't found or caught your fish by 10:30, good luck after that, because it's going to be a grind to locate. You can probably scratch you some out if you want to stick with it, but by that 10:30 mark, the majority of the bite and these fish are pretty much done eating for the day until you maybe get to a later evening time frame, or like I said, if you want to stay out on the water and scratch them out here or there. But again, the baits that we've primarily been using, the 3 main ones, a topwater bait super early, the down souths, the knocking tails, and marker 54 with a sprinkled in a soft dine with that little bit smaller profile bait. Again, we're on the backside of a full moon, fixing transition into the transition days or the wild card days, headed toward a new moon. That's still a few, probably about a week and a half out before we'll get closer to that new moon phase. We just now finished the backside of the full moon. So on the down south, primarily through burner shads, all this past week, all the way up into the full moon, peaked out at the full moon. Back half of the full moon has been original size in the burner shads in multiple different flavors. There's not any particular one that's been good, but it's more the profile size that's been the main thing for us. So I talk about this a lot, is when you get into that full moon, is get into that profile and change it to a smaller bait, because fish, again, they're predominantly night feeders. And that's probably not a bad idea now if you have that kind of time and you want to wait for that sun to get down and get dark. You'll have probably some better success fishing at nighttime right now, because everything's cooler and those fish are enjoying that. So just FYI on that, if that's your bag, then get after it. You'll have some pretty good success fishing at nighttime. I myself do not. But that said, the flavors, like I say, it's not been a color that's been a particular thing. It's been the profile. Now in the knock and tail, it's been pretty much the flavor of it. So the heavy metal has been the most productive in those particular flavors, and right behind that's been Rogue, and then right behind that's been the Greenback. That's the three main ones that I throw. But one that's really kind of stood out more than the other has been the heavy metal in these particular areas for redfish. Redfish have seemed to like it and being productive with it, with that particular flavor in areas. Not always, but mostly. The marker 54, again, around that full moon, we're throwing that baby shrimp. Lots of brown shrimp migration taking place. Lots of them are in the system. You'll see these shrimpers out in the bays, and that's primarily what they're getting. So we're matching that with that, and we've had some moderate success with that as well, with trout, flounder or two mixed in there, and then, of course, redfish. They have been eating those as well. We like to get in some of these back lakes, and some of them have not been too fishable, but you can do it. And that's where we've primarily been throwing our topwaters, like super early in the morning, and are on the shoreline edges of some of these things. And we've had some moderate success. But again, once the sun pops, that bite goes away, and then that's when you have to kind of switch over and start getting down into the water, because those fish are starting to recede back to a little bit deeper water as the sun continues to get higher in the day. Main things around us, again, majors and minors. Primarily been fishing the minor setting and the minor rising this past week. It's been very productive for us. Like I say, once you get past that 10 o'clock time frame, the bite's pretty well done. So get your fish early. The still thing right now that's going on, again, the water's hot, air temps are hot, so adjust accordingly. Make sure that you stay hydrated out there in the water, because it can get dangerous on you in a hurry. Here from the Mott, down in Long Reef Bend, all the way up to Jaybird, all the way down to Spalding, if you will. You know, you've got reefs that are scattered out amongst that. You've got hard-packed sand that's on the outer edges of some of the things, and that's where we've primarily been locating and finding fish up in this particular area. Again, reefs, been primarily talking about reefs for the last few weeks. We've been finding fish in and around these. Some of these systems hold more reefs than others, and the ones that don't have as many, like here in Aransas Bay, you're scattered out. You've got them, like I say, with Spalding, and of course you got Carlos. And we found fish in these areas. Not a tremendous amount of number fish, but some pretty decent fish in some of these areas. So, you know, if you're not finding or locating some fish in an area, then hop back in your boat, and there's enough of these that are close by that you're not going to spend much time leaving from one area to get to another to fish it as well. Like I say, all up here in Carlos, in the dugouts, all these areas here, up here in Spalding, all the way back down to Jaybird and into Paul's Mott area off those points. There's lots of hard-packed sand, grass, and shell that's mixed in there, and that's the main components that you're looking for right now until we get some type of relief for our weather system or a pattern that's in place right now. You're really going to have to find these fish out in a little bit deeper water, unless you're getting on the water super early, pre-sun up, pre-dawn, if you will. Providing that you can run safely to these areas is not a problem. You'll locate some fish early. I mentioned in the last video, if you want to fish at nighttime, it wouldn't be a bad decision to make, especially if you have that kind of time to be able to do that. you'll have some pretty decent success in the nighttime. But primarily, if you're fishing daylight areas, shell, drop-offs, deeper edge of these shell bars and stuff is what you want to find and what you want to locate. The deeper edge of the sand pockets, grass, you'll find some fish in these areas as well. They'll be scattered out, and some of them they might hold a little bit more in a particular area. You may come across a little section where you've got some smaller pods where you may catch 8 or 10 fish that are out of that. And of course, your redfish, like I said, we've been throwing the topwater baits early in the morning and getting some good, pretty decent success early. The one thing too that's happening once that water starts really starting to heat up from the sunshine, that grass starts to float, so your topwater bait kind of gets churned up by grass getting caught up in it. So we pull off of that, and then we start throwing our plastics and suspended baits into these deeper edges of that and continue with that bite as we move on throughout the day. As you work these, you got some of these areas got deeper guts in those. You want to work those edges. You want to work the deeper parts of those guts. And just be patient in those areas. Like I said, you're going to pull some fish out of there, and some of them you might pull some pretty decent fish out of there. But once you start catching some fish in some of these areas, just stick with them. Be patient with it. If you have an opportunity to work a major or a minor and incorporate that into that day, that time of morning, maybe if it extends just a tad bit past 10, what I was talking about earlier is once it gets to about that 10 o'clock time frame, these fish are shutting down. But the one thing that can carry them just a little bit longer into the morning would be a major or minor, depending on what time that happens. So always make sure that you're keeping aware of what's going on with that. We've had, our winds have been really low early in the mornings, and they've picked up as the day has gone on, but it's been very manageable. That's changing just a little bit now as we head into this next week. We're getting a little bit higher winds than what we've typically been having. So make sure that you pay attention to that into your fishing day, however long that you're going to stay out there. Again, lower tides in the morning, so take advantage of that off some of these reefs, maybe that may be deeper than normal, that you wouldn't be able to with the normal tide. But with these lower tides that we've had, it's opened some of those up for you. So the graphs that we have today and stuff, that really shows you great detail of the structure in some of these deeper water areas that can really locate, and you can find some fish off of those. Back shoreline here in Copano Bay up here by Mission. Getting up into Mission and fish the edges on both sides. You got shell that's in there. Again, shell's been the consistent thing. Grass has been consistent so far in these areas, especially as hot as the water temps are getting early in the morning and stuff. So make sure you're fishing these deeper edges around shell bar, shell reef, shell ridges, whatever. Little guts, deeper edges. Fish have been holding in some of these areas. You've got these reefs that are all out here. In Mission Bay, on the deeper side of Mission Bay, scattered in and around there. If you fish up in this area a lot, then you know exactly where I'm talking about. And again, with the detail that a lot of these GPSs have nowadays, you can locate a lot of these things. You can get on top of these things, and you can wade some of them. So I know I've said in the past, now some of these edges that are out here on this, as you come into Mission on this right-hand side, it's pretty soft over there, so make sure that you're really getting on a hard-packed sand area. You get back up in this corner, down the edge. All this here, it lends itself to have you that kind of bottom that you can get, but you get a little away from that, then it's going to get really squishy on you. One of the main areas I like to fish is getting back there where the Mission River comes into it. On that back shoreline, you got a nice, lots of hard-packed sand and grass that's back there, plus a little flow coming from the river. So it creates some current for you. So, so there's some opportunities that can be had back there. Had more redfish caught off of that and some flounder. The trout, again, have been mainly off the deeper edges of the reefs in some of these areas that are back up in here. It's what I just said earlier. If you're familiar with Mission Bay and you know how to fish these areas and you know where these reefs are, get on the deeper edges of some of these reefs or wade up on the shallow side of it and just kind of hang out there and fish the drops on them. And just walk down them, work it best you can in these areas. They're not super, super long reefs like the ones that are down over in San Antonio Bay, but these are a little bit short and squatty. So you may not feel comfortable enough to fish it in the water. So, it's fine if you want to fish it out of the boat and put your trolling motor down or anchor up or whatever you have in some of these areas, and you can fish these and find and locate some fish off of them. The one thing that's been consistent, again, has been our lower tides. It's kind of revealed some of these reefs for you, especially on the deeper side of Mission. Get up and on the shoreline. Been walking those, finding some redfish stuck up here close to these areas here. Mission Lake, it's pretty shallow, especially early. You have to have the right amount of water to get in there and some of those fish. And of course, that water's been hot too. So some of these fish you can see in there, but they're just not really interested in wanting to eat anything. So it's been kind of a catch-22, so to speak. So you can check it out and just cautiously optimistic about what's going to kind of present itself to you. You know, you've got some cut-throughs. Get on the outside of Mission here and get on the front side here on Copano and work these edges all the way down here to the deeper reefs that are out there. You'll find and locate you some fish in and around some of these areas. Again, the minor's been great for us this past week. We've located and found most of our fish in and around that time frame. As we've kind of tapered away from that, of course, that bite tapers off for us. Main baits that we've been throwing, especially back here in Copano, been the down south and the burner shad, multiple different flavors. The knock and tail, and the three main flavors is in the heavy metal, greenback, and the rogue flavor have been the most productive for us. The soft dine's been pretty good in that particular thing, especially off the deeper edge of these reefs. It's been very, it's been kind of hit and miss, but we've caught some better fish with that soft dine. So kind of keep that in mind for you too. And then of course, Little John by Mirror Lure. It's been a very good bait for us. Really radic darting bait that you can get some good reactionary strikes off of that. So just kind of take that into consideration. Again, patience is going to be really key right now until we do get a little bit of weather relief. But there's fish to be had out there. They can be found, and they will eat when you present it to them properly during the right time frames. You can find and locate these fish and catch them.